Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming to the next meeting of the Opportunity Coalition. I'm John Brackney, and I'm privileged to be on the advisory board for the Opportunity Coalition. And I have a great privilege tonight, and that's to introduce the founder and host of the Opportunity Coalition. Brian doesn't generally talk a lot about himself. What he does is he talks about ideas. He talks about people. He talks about how to engage those people and ideas to make a better society. He serves on a wide variety of boards, but then he decided that Colorado needed something different. It needed the opportunity to have generally business people, but sometimes community leaders, sometimes government officials, to get together and have a dialogue in a different kind of way. One that isn't so adversarial, one that isn't trying to make the other team look so bad, one that's trying to create wealth for our community. So you know Brian, I hope. If you don't, you need to get to know him. He's a small town guy. How many of you been to Olathe? Only 5 of us? So it's between, what are the 2 main towns that Olathe is between? I wouldn't say Grand Junction, it's south of Grand Junction, but Montrose is correct. What's the other town on the other side? Delta. And if you haven't spent time in that part of the world, you're making a huge mistake, because I think those folks in that part of Colorado represent Coloradoans better than folks that are born and raised in now Centennial. And if you haven't seen the beauty of that part of state, I'm trying to describe what makes Brian Watson who he is. He's a family guy. He's a small town guy. He's a guy who realizes that when you work really hard, you're going to create opportunities for your own family and for your own small community. But he also has a vision. He doesn't think we should just be 3 Colorados. He thinks we should be 1 Colorado. And he doesn't think we should be Republican. That's what I am, although you might have some tendencies to be Republican. He thinks we should have Democrats and Libertarians and perhaps even Green folks work together for the common good to create wealth. There's lots to argue about in our state and our nation, but what we really should do is create a coalition of people together to create opportunities for all of us so we have enough wealth so we can actually argue about things. It's a really unique proposition, the Opportunity Coalition. It stands for capitalism and free enterprise, constitutional history, a rule of law, knowing what the groundwork is so we can argue about things. But most of all, it means freedom, it means liberty, it creates opportunity for all of us as individuals and society. You know Brian because he has a degree from CU. Go Buffs. And go CSU, last game, sorry Brian. And he's made a remarkable career in real estate. But that's not just what he's about as a business guy, making money and creating opportunities for his clients and his partners. He wants to create opportunity for every single Coloradoan, and he doesn't want to do it by himself. He wants to do it with you. And this is an opportunity for us to pull ourselves up, look for opportunities, and create wealth for every single person we come in contact. It's my honor to introduce Brian Watson, our host and founder.
Well, I don't know if John has spent much time with my wife, but when he said I didn't talk much about myself, my wife may disagree. But anyway, thank you for being here. My name is Brian Watson. I want to welcome all of you to the Opportunity Coalition. For those that don't know, this is one of the buildings that we own right here. And by the way, we do pay our bills. When you came down the hallway and you saw some of that drywall missing, it's because we're doing improvements in the building right now. And we bought this building from a lender. And we did so because the Innovation Pavilion was in here. And for people that are not familiar with the Innovation Pavilion, over 80 new companies have been created here in the last year and a half. The youngest entrepreneur is in middle school, and the oldest is in their 80s, and everything in between. And that's where real opportunity is created. So I want to thank the Innovation Pavilion for allowing us to have the event here. I also want to acknowledge first Elle Hughes, who's back there in the back, who helps make all the food and drink possible. So we got to give a round of applause to Elle. She loves it when I do that. I also want to acknowledge some of our advisory board members that are here this evening. We have Mr. Luke Wyckoff over here with a glass of wine. We have Kyle Henderson on his left. We have Sue Kenfield over here. We have John Brackney. And did I miss anyone else? I want to make sure. I want to thank them for their service. So before we get started tonight, I'd like to share a few thoughts. And those thoughts are on innovation. One of the challenges of living in this modern age is that we have come to think that innovation is always about technology. We have developed a bit of bias that innovation is about technologies developed in a garage by some 20-year-olds, and that we may not fit the definition of being a true innovator. But that wasn't always our view, and it shouldn't be today. Business schools still teach about the innovative approach used by people like Henry Ford to build the assembly line and Ray Kroc to build McDonald's. Just think how machines like the MRI have transformed healthcare, or how companies like Charles Schwab have changed investing. When you consider some of the greatest innovations of the last few decades, it is true that much of the list is technology-based. The internet, PCs and laptop computers, and mobile phones. But we have also seen industries transformed by innovation in customer service, process, and approach. The woman who developed the Aflac talking duck ads brought an age of funny and very memorable advertising. That is innovation. I see this in my industry. At my company, we take abandoned commercial real estate buildings that appear to others as being useless, as being tired, and we create something new to establish new jobs and opportunity. We like to approach every project with the idea that something great can be created if we keep an open mind. It is also interesting how one innovation leads to another. When we all put PCs on our desks, email was possible. When we put fiber optic cable in the ground, it allowed us to move massive amounts of data online. The examples are endless. We can now have our DNA tested. Think about that for a moment. We can capture energy from the sun in a photovoltaic panel. We can get money from an ATM without ever talking with a bank teller, which they may appreciate as well, but I don't know. These were all ideas in someone's head at the start. Then those innovative ideas were brought to life, and they have changed our world. That's the thing about innovation. All the products and services we value today came from the mind of some passionate, creative individual. Whether you call it inspiration from God or luck or whatever you may like to call it, the human mind is programmed to continually improve the world around us. That is how we were designed. Your innovative idea might be something totally new or a significant improvement on an existing product or service. You might have an idea making your product or service easier for people to buy. Or maybe you have thought of a better way to train employees or support your customers. All these are potentially valuable innovations. You do not need to be a scientist, an engineer, or a technology genius to be an innovator. What's needed is to take action on your idea. It is not enough to have an idea. You have to do something with it. So I challenge you to consider where you can create positive changes in your business or industry. I know you have ideas for improvement, each and every one of you. Don't wait for someone else to do it. The world needs your unique and innovative ideas right now. And the rewards for putting your ideas forth are potentially great. Our speaker this evening may change your thinking about innovation. Josh Stewart grew up in Ireland, and he was hired as a bush pilot in South Africa. Doesn't that sound like just a great life? I mean, I like your style, I just gotta tell you. He began to dream of a new kind of private aviation club, a place recognized for its genuine people, passion to serve, and commitment to shine as a beacon to inspire others to live their dreams. XJet is the result of Josh's dream, a private aviation club offering 7-star services. Is that me ringing, or who's that ringing? Can you guys hear it ringing? I have an alarm going off at 5:30. That's never happened before. There we go. It must be time for the Opportunity Coalition event. 7-star services for jet owners and users. XJet is an award-winning company that provides private jet owners with this 7-star service, which includes the finest facilities in the industry and a comprehensive global network to help facilitate effortless travel around the globe. XJet's flagship facility is located at Denver's Centennial Airport, with additional locations launching in London, Paris, Dubai, and Saudi Arabia. Josh was recently named one of the top 5 most influential Gen XYZ young professionals, and also recently received the Navy SEAL Foundation's Fire in the Gut Award. And if you're going to get a Fire in the Gut Award, I'm thinking that's a pretty good place to get it from. This award was presented to Josh for demonstrating superior dedication, leadership, and perseverance in rising to the top of his profession. I believe you will find Josh to be an inspiring role model for bringing your innovative ideas to life. Now usually, and I need to tell Josh this just to prepare him and also to prepare you, many of our past guest speakers have brought a gift from their company, something that they want to give away to the group. Mr. Tom Shane, we had hoped for diamonds. We didn't get diamonds, but we had a great talk from Tom. Yeah, we need to get sparkles, a sparkling talk. Thank you, Tom, for that sparkling talk. And tonight, I'm just hopeful that maybe Josh is going to hand out a plane to one of us tonight. So just be here, don't leave early, because it might happen. Please join me in welcoming Josh Stewart.
Well, firstly, thanks to the Opportunity Coalition and Brian Watson for this invite, and to all of you guys coming here tonight. It's great that a portion of our ticket sales goes towards scholarships for everybody here in the States. That's a good reason to be here, so we all deserve a pat on the back for that one. What I want to do tonight is share my story about XJet, which is really how a dream turned into an invincible vision, and the mechanism behind that. I'm cognizant that you're all here tonight. You could be continuing to drink and network, so I want to make sure I'm productive and hopefully a bit inspirational. If I talk too fast with the Irish accent, just wave your hand or throw something at me. But there's always a beginning, and my beginning started in Belfast, Northern Ireland, as Brian talked about. And it was a good upbringing. I went to boarding school right in the centre of Belfast, right in the middle of the 1980s, which was the time of the Troubles. We're great at under-emphasising things in Ireland. But funny enough, one fact that most people don't think about is for a young teenager at boarding school in Belfast is an incredibly safe city if you weren't involved in politics. If you weren't involved in the political side of things, which sort of occupied both valleys, it was so safe. You couldn't walk out of a bar or walk down a corner of a street without seeing a British officer or a police officer saying, "Not my turf, son." So it was very actually safe. It was a good place to grow up in, but it was repressive. And I was keen to get out of the island of Ireland and head to what I thought was the big smoke, which was London, which was a big move for me. And just to put it in perspective, I went to London University. It's got 132,000 undergrads, which I think by even US standards, that's huge. Now there's 18 colleges make that up. But it was a huge university, and I was out of the little pond, or little island of Ireland, and I wanted to make an impact. And at that age, at 19, to be honest, I wanted to meet girls. So I needed something to differentiate myself. And looking at 132,000 students, I was thinking this is going to be difficult. I can't use the old Irish accent out there. They didn't like it. So the RAF. I walked past a recruitment fair and saw the sign for the Royal Air Force. Thought, that checks out. Pilot, officer, uniform, girls. So I actually became passionate about flying, but joking aside, when I went up on my very first flight, I was totally captivated. I was captivated by the freedom of flight. It was pretty amazing. For any of you that are into aviation and haven't read the poem, there's a great poem called High Flight by John Gillespie Jr., who's actually an American aviator and poet who was killed in World War II over England. But it starts off with, "Though I've slipped the surly bonds of earth and he ends with, I put my hand out and touched the face of God. I'm saying lots of nodding, but it was like that. It was like de-shackling. You know, you can imagine England is pretty bad for weather. You've got those overcast days. You get inside your little airplane, you pop up through the cloud, and you've got this limitless blue skies, endless possibilities. It's tremendously freeing, and it was great. But it was during this experience in the Royal Air Force that the first part of, and Brian did the intro perfectly, actually, thank you, because it's tied in here perfectly without even talking, so thank you for that. But it was the first time I got a realization of the power of our own minds and how limiting we can be for ourselves without even knowing it. You can imagine this, if I can sort of paint the picture. I mean, this Royal Air Force gig was brilliant. It paid money towards your college. You got to fly planes for free on the Queen's ticket, and you got to use that uniform to enjoy your extracurricular activities. So it was pretty important, but there's 400 of us, and there was only going to be 40 at the end. So every flight was called a chop ride. Every exam was a chop ride. If you made a mistake, you were gone. And it was a horrible walk of shame. We used to fly out of RAF Benson, which was the Queen's Air Force was based. And you had to walk down past all the planes, between all the guys barbecuing and playing croquet, into the officers' mess, grab your uniform and go home. It was pretty horrendous when you got chopped. That was pretty gutting, because for a lot of us it was the only way we could afford to fly. Anyway, you can imagine me one day sitting there, and normally the flying instructors were low-level flying instructors, flight lieutenants. I was a pilot officer. But out comes the guy that ran the whole Air Force, the whole squadron, out of the Queen's Air Force Base, Wing Commander Cullum. And he kind of had, it's like a headmaster at school. When he walked in, you kind of went, And he says, Pilot Officer Stewart with me. And I was like, oh shit. I've got the big boss today, added pressure, got in the plane, strapped up, went up, and did our aerobatics, all fine, loops, rolls, barrel, all good. And then it came to a simple thing. He said, let's do some basic dead reckoning, some time, distance calculations. We're here, we're there. And I choked. I just literally froze. And the 3 words you didn't want to hear at that age in the Royal Air Force were, I have control. That's when he took control of the aircraft, and that meant you were done. You basically didn't get to fly it again. When you landed, head down, and you had to go home. So I was waiting for the words, and he was reading my file, and he said, this is weird. You've never frozen or choked or this mind freeze before. What's going on? You just had a beautiful aerobatic display. And what had actually happened is, going back to my school, back in Belfast boarding school, there was 2 teachers, which were a highly bizarre situation because they were husband and wife. And the wife was my English teacher, and I loved, and she was lovely. And her husband was the math teacher, and I didn't love him by any stretch of the imagination. And what had actually happened is, I was pulled up in front of the class one day in front of the blackboard. We didn't have whiteboards back then, and I think Aaron's coming along, we have them now. But I was up doing some basic algebra, and I made a mistake, and the class laughed, and the teacher made some snide comment, and that experience obviously went on to my subconscious. And it was something that in that plane, I was just thinking there, oh my God, I'm not good at math. And it almost flunked me out of flying. Now luckily, that wing commander, for whatever reason, saw enough potential in me, gave me a few seconds, and I squeezed through and didn't get chopped, which was great. But it could have affected my whole life, just understanding something sitting there, because you know, if I hadn't become a pilot and hadn't passed that and gone on to fly for a number of years, maybe XJet wouldn't have been started and I wouldn't have been here. So it was definitely something that really was big for me. After that, in graduating, I mean, to be totally honest, college was a total, it was so difficult trying to juggle as much time as humanly possible in the air and doing just enough to graduate. And luckily it worked because I got my honours, and I remember the passing out ceremony with the professor looking at me, and all he kept muttering was my attendance record. He was horrified that I passed and managed to fly and squeeze in the odd party. But after that, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I wanted to combine my 2 passions at that age, which were travel and flying. I went off to Africa and spent literally 8 years in Africa. It was amazing, flying everything I could get my hands on. British planes, American planes, some really old dodgy Russian aircraft, anything to get the experience. And it was brilliant, but I always had in the back of my mind that I wanted to come to the States. I'd watched Top Gun and seen the movies, and I always wanted to come to the first world and see what it was like. And back in those days, in the 80s in Ireland, America was, it was just so huge. It was outrageously good. I mean, we couldn't even get over that you drove convertibles and had cell phones, and Ireland seemed so archaic back then. So I was keen, so I left at one point. I went off to the Caribbean and set up a little US airline. I thought this was a good way to sort of get my feet wet with the US regulations under the FAA. So we set up a little airline running out of Nevis, St. Kitts in the West Indies, running up to Puerto Rico and then bouncing around all the islands. And it was November registered aircraft, so it was under the FAA, so it was great. And I thought after leaving Africa, the Caribbean would be lovely, but Nevis is 36 miles long. And once you've been out for a few nights in the town, you know everybody, and the supply of ladies wasn't great either. So it was looking a bit daunting. But then, unfortunately, the world took a serious change right about then. It was 9/11, and as a US airline, we were just basically shut down. So I did what I knew and went back to Africa. And that's when things got a bit hairy, and that really was sort of the beginning of my, the real seeds, I suppose, for XJet. As a lot of you can probably relate to, I was in my 20s, a pilot, and I thought I was pretty much bulletproof and invincible. And before, I'd been flying tourists around the Okavango Delta, down in South Africa and the Cape, and beautiful parts of Africa, over Mount Kilimanjaro on the coast. It was really, really beautiful. But then I ended up in Sudan and Somalia doing a lot of work for the UN, for the Red Cross, and then some work for the US government. And it's amazing when you're that age, you think just, nothing will take you down. Even though you see friends die and accidents happen, you think, nah, not going to happen to me. And I got myself into a couple of situations. I'm talking bad about Africa. It's the most gorgeous continent in the world, and there are gorgeous places. I wouldn't recommend Mogadishu for a couple of nights, definitely not. Or some towns in South Sudan, but it really is gorgeous. But I ended up in these situations, and one of them was particularly hairy because we were flying what we called in those days non-food items. NFI, I'll let you in fare for what you want. And we had a little bit of paper in our front pocket that came from the Department of Justice over here in the US. It was meant to be your get out of jail card free, which looked really weak, to be honest. It wasn't something you would have relied on. Anyway, we're in this situation, and we're whizzing along southern Sudan and with my cargo. And we got into a bit of a tricky situation, and we're on the way down, and my co-pilot says to me, Captain, what's going to happen? I said, no, we're definitely going to crash. And his eyes were the size of like saucers. And both of us weren't scared about crashing, to be totally honest. We were scared about who we'd meet when we crashed, because our cargo clearly delineated which side we're on, and we were in a situation and over a town called Juba in southern Sudan, which was controlled by northern Sudan at the point, which is now the new capital actually, that was controlled by Khartoum, and we were thinking this is going to be really, really tricky. Anyway, while the co-pilot was shouting and wailing quite a bit, I was thinking, I promise, I'll go to church, I'll go to America, and I'll do everything if you let me out of this one. I'm going to be a good boy. And weirdly enough, my dog, who's a big 120-pound Rhodesian Ridgeback, was called Juba, where I was hurtling towards with one engine missing with this bad cargo. Anyway, long story short, we survived, landed on a road, met people that were friendly to what we had on board, that were pro-US, and my little bit of paper worked. And after spending a couple of nights in the Bundus of Sudan with a bunch of rebels, which was interesting, the one iconic fact is the UN drops all this grain here when they have the White and Blue Niles, which forms the Nile River. Ample source of agriculture, but we still drop grain for whatever reason, and these guys turn it into alcohol called Seco, and it makes you totally numb and you go blind, basically temporarily. And when you're in the jungle with a bunch of Sudanese rebels, this was a good thing. I was giving you more of that stuff. But I hitched away out of there with a Russian cargo plane, got back to Lokichokio in northeast Kenya, and then down into Nairobi, and said, right, that's it. I made the promise to the big boss, I've got to leave and do this American thing properly. So I left. And I came off here to the States, and I arrived in Florida in the tail end of 2003. And I had an idea to form a private aviation company. That's all it was. It was an idea, and it was a dream. It wasn't cemented. My mind was divided. My energy was all over the place. I was open to it, as Brian was saying, about having an open mind, but I wasn't focused. There was a lot of energy going everywhere. Anyway, if you can just picture the fact that here's an Irish guy. Luckily I had US licenses, but I wasn't completely legal at that point to be working. My visa was meant to explore opportunities, and I had a 120-pound Rhodesian Ridgeback with me, which made interviewing really pretty difficult, to be totally honest, because every time I'd go, they'd say, let's go flying, and I'd say, can someone look after this man-killer dog for me? He's a real baby. But it all worked out, and I got a job flying a Citation, managed to blag my way in there, and was bouncing around Florida. It was all looking pretty good. And then somebody up in Colorado asked for delivery of a little Citation Eagle, which Citation won, a small little jet. And I jumped in the plane and flew it up here. And that's when I phoned my mum back in Ireland and said, I'm up in Colorado, it's absolutely beautiful. And she goes, oh my goodness, you have a second cousin out there, Susan. And I hadn't seen Susan, I don't know, 10 to 15 years. So I popped down to see Susan in their house there in Greenwood Village with the kids. And we were having one of those chats. Now, any of you, if you know Susan, she's got that sort of piercing look, and she's absolutely passionate about passion and people and your potential. And she's like, are you totally fulfilled? Do you know what you want? I was sitting there in the coffee with in her kitchen with a cup of coffee thinking, no, I have this idea for XJet, but I have no idea how to implement it. I've just dropped the plane here. I'm living in Florida. I've got this big dog, and we were catching up. And anyway, she mentioned she'd been on this seminar, that she understood more about the power of the mind. I said, okay, this sounds fascinating. Now, to me, remember, America was this great open, vast space, and no disrespect, but there's lots of seminars goes on and lots of self-help and all this, and I'd never done any seminar. University degree and flying exams, all very structured, very linear. And I'm thinking, what can you really learn in a seminar that's going to change it? Anyway, I trusted Susan. She's obviously been incredibly successful, finding oil in Belize and a multitude of other things and transforming a nation. So I didn't hesitate, jumped and went on the seminar. Now, it was a fascinating experience, and in brief, what I learned was pretty simple. It's what Brian was talking about tonight. I just learned simply that same example I was giving you earlier about the math, that choking example with the wing commander. I learned we have two minds. We have our conscious mind and our unconscious mind that forms our whole mind. They often say a genius is somebody that can focus their whole mind on something for 2 minutes. I know I can't do that. I've got ADT or whatever you call it, that thing. So I can't do that. But you got to bring those two minds together to focus. And we learned, Sigmund Freud said it, we're merely puppets to our unconscious. And here I was very aware that I had that example when flying along, that something that happened in my past that I didn't control choked me. It sort of froze me up. So we learned that, what you put on your unconscious can be drawn out, and you've seen it in so many examples, people that want to lose weight or be successful, and they second guess themselves, or their own mind is the first hurdle they have to overcome. How many entrepreneurs you've seen that has an idea, and the first person to shout down is themselves? If they get past themselves, then they get onto their own family, and they're scared they're going to jump out too much into the unknown and lose a safe paying job, and they're talked down. So this was a real interesting thing for me, and sitting here in Colorado in America ties to this so well for me. If you think about it, before the last 150 years, you mentioned Henry Ford, before that last 150 years, the last 10, 20,000 years, not to disrespect America, but there wasn't much growth. There was teepees and smoke signals and I think bow and arrows and stuff. And then in a 150-year period, America had this quantum leap of growth to become the greatest country on the planet. Outstanding growth. Why? Brian referred to it. Some of these guys came with the right mindset, and girls, but I think back then, not being sexist, there was a lot of guys. Henry Ford, Edison, Carnegie, Rockefeller. They jumped outside of the bounds. People that came to America wanted a new life, a new beginning. They sailed treacherous ocean journeys to come here and wagons across the country. But in 150 years, you went from smoke signals to powered flight to landing on the moon to what we have today. It's an amazing development. And that really was as a result of people with vision taking action, just like Brian was saying. It really was a pretty amazing mindset. Tony, who runs a seminar that went on, tells a great story about meeting Arnie Schwarzenegger in 1973 in Gold's Gym in Venice Beach. And Arnie came in here and he was a big meathead. He hadn't had any success at that point. And all these guys training the gym were meatheads. They were all Mr. Universe, Mr. Ireland, I think Tony was, bunch of stuff. And Arnie came over to them and said, I have a master plan. And all these guys were like laughing at this guy with a strange accent. He said, I'm going to get into the movies. I'm going to make $1 million a movie. I'm going to marry royalty. I'm going to get into politics. And these guys were hooting and hollering and whooping and laughing, saying, how can you? You're a beefhead. You don't speak English. Have you seen your surname? There's no way that's going to be on the screen around the cinema. It's offensive. There's no way. And Tony was explaining that the more they laughed at him, the more certain he was. He was certain himself. He had his plan. He was going to stick to it, ignore the circumstances, and obviously it came true. And maybe a more relevant or recent example, which some of the Americans might not like, because this guy sort of ended your World Cup chances in football if you're following football. But Cristiano Ronaldo, don't know if you know him, he's 29 years old. He captains Portugal's team and he plays for Real Madrid. He made, just out of comparison, $73 million last year. They say his buyout clause is $1 billion US. Guy's 29 years old. However, Sir Alex Ferguson, who trained him at Manchester United, and Sir Alex Ferguson is considered, those of you in soccer, sorry, not football, I get my terms right, considered to be the best coach on planet Earth. He said, well, it's easy about Ronaldo. He's the fittest guy in the world, that doesn't matter, because he genuinely is. Second, he's the most talent I've ever seen, and he's compared to Pele, Maradona, that doesn't matter. His superior ability comes from his mental ability. He even said it himself, Cristiano, in an interview in the latest Men's Health, if you want to read it and see a body that makes you feel guilty having a beer or a burger. Trust me, he's got about 6% body fat. Read the article. He says that his main ability, why he's the best player in the world, and he's not short of an ego, is because of his mental ability. So these mindsets transformed a country, and I've had so many examples, and I was always fascinated by mindsets. That's what led to XJet. So I went out there on that seminar with a dream, and I came home with an invincible vision. I wanted to build a company that was entirely different from the ground up. When I was bouncing across the States as a young kid, I was shocked by the business model that was supporting private jet owners. To me, greatest country on earth, number one to the most private jets on earth, And here you have these folks successful enough to own and operate a private jet, and yet the business model that supports it is dirty. It's got pretty dirty economics, and it's very pilot-centric. Now I can say this, I'm not going to offend any pilots in the room, I'm a pilot so I can say it, but really what it was is they generally thought, the owner of the asset, he or she owns a private jet, don't worry about it. An extra 10, 20 cents on fuel is not going to matter. And if you walk around in the aviation business, you'll see it. You go into FBOs, it's pilot driven, pilot rewards programs, toaster margins, DVD players, every type of thing. It got so ridiculous. We were flying around the States, actually in Susan's plane, and we went down to New Orleans and they came out with this huge big fresh crab display. And we thought, oh great, we're starving. No, they went to the pilot with it. Or you go to find the Wi-Fi and they say, no, the boosters in the pilot's office. It's a very pilot-driven model because the pilot is usually the one they assumed making the decisions. Yet when you come to Denver, there's a weird anomaly. The business model was so underserving of the jet owners. You had people, billionaires in Denver, having to build their own facilities to take care of their own jets because the traditional model wasn't doing it. So you've got folks building these hangars, and now they're in the aviation business. And for public companies in the balance sheet, that wasn't a good thing. So my idea at XJet, was to correct that imbalance. Focus on the back passenger. So I went and talked to a bunch of jet owners and asked them what it is they wanted. And they told me it's really pretty simple. They wanted asset protection for the aircraft. They wanted really good service, and they wanted economics they understood. Now, for those of you who know how to operate a private jet, apart from the cost of financing the jet, the fuel cost is the second biggest cost. I mean, it's a brutal cost. And you'll see people flying out of the way to avoid fuel costs. Yet the mindset in the broken FBO model was, just tack on the fuel cost, cover the pilot incentive programs, the owner won't know. So we took out that margin. No markup on the fuel for our membership. So if you imagine a mall, XJet provided a club service to these owners of jets. And we signed long-term leases with them, and they were like our anchor tenant. They were our Neiman Marcus or our Saks Fifth Avenue or Nordstrom down at Park Meadows. So they locked us in for long-term leases, and we had to provide those three things: world-class asset protection, so we had to build beautiful hangars, which we did, had to deliver transparent economics, which we did, annual membership fee, all the synergies and savings to operating as a large group passed on to them, premium on the hangar for the asset protection, and no markup or margin on fuel, none, which is a big sensitive issue. I'm sure Tom can probably agree. It's horrible to get gouged in fuel. There's some airports that are controlled by monopolies, San Francisco and multiple, and the price can be 9, 10, 11, 12 bucks a gallon. Imagine taking a few thousand gallons and heading off to Asia. Pretty brutal. So we formed this business model, but again, none of this was proven. I have no MBA, funny accent, and no facility, no proof. And I had to go and sell to some of these members. And I remember one particular meeting downtown in Denver where the chap who became a founding member. And I remember seeing, his big donation to the art museum sticking out behind him. And I was pretty intimidated. And I came in with a tie on. He was like, bloody Irishman, not even wearing a tie. And I was like, oh, this is going to go terrible. And from that seminar, that dream had turned into an invincible vision. And I had to sell him a vision, just a vision. All I had was dirt. Nothing else but dirt and an idea, but it was my vision. And he joined. And so did other people. And I was so delighted. I'd signed up the members, raised the capital, and we're ready to open. And I thought that was the hard bit. I had no clue about running a company and what was to come, especially with the timing. We opened at the end of 2007, right when America took a gasp, the world took a gasp, and the recession hit us pretty hard. And here we were with a brand new business model, 200% premium in the middle of this very difficult market. And of course, private jets were seen as excessive rather than a business tool, which they are. I'll make that political point there. But it was a difficult scenario. So right out of the get-go, we promised these billionaires and millionaires 7-star service. We had to deliver, and we also were faced with this pretty drastic economic situation. So we were really tested. I can tell you something, a divided mind and all over the place wouldn't have worked then. It had to be just lock, stock, we're going for this. We're doing an Arnie, as I would call it. We're just not going to be swayed by the circumstances. We're going to continue to focus on our product, and it's going to all be all right. There's definitely times where you're hanging on, having a whiskey at night, thinking, is this worth it? It was so easy being a pilot, but it all worked out. But where I want to go with that is, then the next big obstacle to hit us was, Denver, if you don't know it, and if anybody wants to come out and tour XJet and see it, it's an amazing facility, if I say so myself, but it is beautiful. I love it. And Denver itself, what you have on your your doorstep here, is the second or third busiest, depending on the metrics, each year, busiest general aviation airport in the country. It's a huge economic driver. And my competitors, there's 4 of us, 4 providers on the field. The other 3 are either all billion-dollar companies or owned by billionaires, so fairly significant competition. And rightly so, one of those owners, who's a great guy from Texas, I like him, he woke up and said, look, we've got a new guy in the field. He's untested. The business model is untested. They got the highest cost of entry onto the airfield. Let's start a price war on top of this recession. We've got deep pockets. We'll see how long this kid can last. Now, people benefited from that. I'm sure you did, Tom. I'm sure a lot of people got cheap fuel on the field, and it was a good thing. But this is meant to last for 90 days. And to give you an idea of the parameters of a price war, because it doesn't mean much, let's just look at Centennial. 12 million gallons of jet fuel a year is what it does on average. The normal margin, which is the margin for the operator, is about $1.75 a gallon back then before this price war. So we're talking about 21 million gallons of free cash at the airport for jet fuel. When this price war came along, we went down to 30 cents into plane, down to about $3.6 million. I wouldn't even call it margin because you're just about covering your nut. So we wiped out $17 million gone. Now it was meant to last for 90 days, and it went on for 2.5 years. And I definitely feel I was tested. I mean, it was a tough situation for all of us, but when everybody cut back, we focused on our invincible vision, focused on our product. We didn't sway, we didn't get unnerved, and our members stuck with us, which was amazing. And we had that advantage of these long-term leases and these members who really believed in the vision that saw us through. We didn't lose a single member, which is pretty darn amazing. So we came through that, we came through it truthfully, and I'm gloating about the company here, not myself. So, we ended up being number one in America in this tough time for 2 years running. The third year became number 2, is that right? All right, I'm just looking at range. So 1, 1, and 2. So while everyone else is cutting back and gouging each other's eyes out, we were just focused on delivering the product. And that was a real good test. Not only was the recession, not only were private jets vilified, and it was really seen as, overreaching when it really is not. It's such a business. So you try and get to some of those cities, what these folks do. I mean, we have big corporations come into Denver. The other day we had HP have a board meeting. They flew in with 5 Gulfstreams. Very efficient board meeting. Took off again all around the world. I mean, there's just things you couldn't do in a day without the use of a private jet. But we survived. We won all these awards. It was a great endorsement. And then the biggest part of it all was really the fact that the model was in a position, this new type of business model, we were able to replicate it. That was my bit that I really wanted. I wanted to prove it, proof of concept. I wanted to prove it worked in Denver, and we could take this model around the world and really give it a good lash globally and try, and it is a cheeky goal, I will admit, but we want to be number 1 in the world. And we want a big market capitalization by 2019. So we have these clearly defined goals. We're using that unconscious mind, that conscious mind, that whole mind. We've set the vision, and all our employees, we don't call them employees, all our partners, our XJetters are committed to that. So we got the license in London. We secured a facility in London, which we're opening this year. We got a license in Paris-Le Bourget, which is the largest airport for general aviation in Europe. So similar to Centennial here. I mean, just think Centennial's competing with Van Nuys in California and Teterboro in New York. That's pretty good stuff. All that business coming in here, it's great. We secured a license in Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which should be interesting. There's not a whole bunch of hands raising to go out to there to work, but that's fine. There's a lot of private jets. And we're going to take this model around the world, as I said, to be number 1. The interesting one I want to focus on a little bit here is the UAE in Dubai. Because talking about mindsets, the mindsets in that place is the capital of mindsets. I mean, it's got the biggest, tallest, widest, everything, but literally from a dusty, dirty emirate, which had no money, back only, it's the same age as me, but it's 3 years older, so they're 44 years old as a country. And when they found their very first drop of oil, the founding father of the country, Sheikh Zayed, who's now passed away, he put it straight into infrastructure education in the country. Didn't take it out for himself, put it back into the country. And what they've done is amazing. But the reason why I'm telling you a little bit about Dubai is just because we went to bid for a license at the new Dubai airport. And now we were in serious competition. I mean, we're competing against General Dynamics. I forget how many billions they have, but it's 22 or 23. It's pretty big. And they had this huge board presentation, and they were flying in their Gulfstreams. And I'm thinking, oh, we're definitely in the big boy field here. This is going to be tricky to win this license. There's only 4 licenses to be awarded at this airport. Now, to put that in perspective, the current airport for the first half of 2014, with a little bit of a runway closure for resurfacing, trounced Heathrow as the world's busiest international airport. So Heathrow's dead, Dubai's on the way up. They're now building this new, what they call Aerotropolis, 5 runways, capacity of 160 million passengers. I mean, if you go out there, it's just outrageous to believe. But we secured one of those licenses to operate there. And it was fascinating when I got to meet His Highness, who basically owns Emirates Airline and runs aviation in the Emirate and runs the ports and the banks. He was fascinated by the business model. The strangest thing happened in the meeting. He said, how's Centennial Airport and what's it like? And he was asking me all these questions about Centennial. This isn't the meeting with His Highness. And I'm like, this is bizarre. Anyway, he was a graduate of DU. So he loved Denver. And I'm thinking, oh my God, in aviation, there's a few people you really admire, maybe Richard Branson. And trust me, I love America for everything. No one else with a funny accent could have raised money to build XJet. But your airlines and your airports, a little bit of your beer, it's better in Colorado, need some work. Definitely your airlines. And he was chatting all about Denver. And he was amazed by the business model. It was seated in Denver, that we come from Denver and we had this different approach. And he has his own jets, his own Gulfstreams. So he understood the business model and he awarded this license. I didn't expect the type of reaction that happened. There was total recoil. All these guys started phoning him directly, saying, this is ridiculous. How come you're giving this kid a license? He doesn't have any proven track record in the Middle East. This doesn't work. And he stuck by us. He said, I like your energy, I like your vision. It's ballsy, it's committed, and I'm going to stick with you. And he took a picture with me shaking hands. And as they said out there, the UAE is very different to the US. The US is very contractual. The UAE is very much about the relationship. So the picture is almost worth more than any contract, because you don't want to get into the legal system out there. But we secured that license, which I think validates the type of business model we have. But under this journey, or over this journey of building XJet, my real passion, and the reason why I think we've succeeded, and the reason why we did survive those pretty brutal circumstances, is because of this new type of model. You referenced it, that it's really being with an open mind and this new type of technology. And I think understanding that is just huge. The majority of our company has done this seminar. They understand the power of a program. They understand the power of employing that deeper part of your mind and just staying true to it. Not wavering, not flip-flopping, not flicking, just staying true to it. And we've also built a model around that. We've built a business model that encourages people with direct feedback. Some people think it's a bit harsh because it is autotelic. If they do well, they get a green dot. If they don't do so well, they get a yellow dot. If they don't do well at all, they get a red dot. If they get 3 red dots in the same category for 3 consecutive periods, it's not looking good. So it's a bit of a harsh environment for sure, but it's pushing people to be the very best of themselves. They're coming out to realize their potential. And that's what's really happened at XJet. We don't want to hire robots. You can't promise 7-star service to somebody that's owning a private jet. I mean, this weekend there's a bunch of Gulf Stars in. We had Rihanna in a couple of weeks ago, and you can't say to them, we're the best. You've got maybe 1 second minimum, or maximum sometimes, at the bottom of the steps to connect with that back passenger and say why XJet is a better example, why XJet deserves your premium pricing. And that really comes from presence and being there and being focused, not being all over the show and worried about what's going on, just true commitment to that overall vision. And that's what we do through this business model. And now we're working on it with Susan and Belize on a country-to-country level, which will be our next big hit, which is pretty exciting. But to tie that back round, I mean, one of the keys and why I'm here tonight, and thank you for having me also, Brian and Kyle on the board, is that I love sharing this story. I genuinely do. I'm very passionate about sharing it. I'm very passionate about sharing it with the community. And again, I'm gloating about XJet, not myself here, but we had the Navy SEALs event the other night, and they raised a record amount for the Navy SEALs Foundation, which is just truly brilliant, because that foundation lets these people lose their breadwinners in their family, and this foundation lets them continue with their education, takes away that financial worry, and it brings a family together. And 94 cents of every dollar goes towards that, which I think is just outstanding. And I wish we could do more and more and more. But we do hold a number of charity events at XJet. We're very, very committed to the community. It's not lip service. It's not a tagline. It's what we do. And we've raised to date over $5 million for communities and charities in Denver, Colorado. Men for the Cure, the Navy SEALs Foundations, Challenge Air Foundation, multiple ones. So I encourage any of you that want to come out to XJet, have a party, smoke a cigar, have a glass of wine, and support a really good cause. So we can let you know, Lorraine or any of the team here can let you know which events are coming up, because it is an important part of what we do. The key to all the success, though, has been the XJet team. It's the extended family, and we are all absolutely committed to this vision. I have to tell you that there's not any wavering, which is really good to go into as a young entrepreneur, to go into a company. And if you're just feeling a little bit on shaky ground and all these circumstances are coming at you and everyone else is resolute and standing strongly behind that vision, there's nothing more strengthening than to feel that. So it really is to our entire team of XJetters and our partners and our investors and our believers and our members that have stuck with us that really got us here today. But really, to wrap this up, I mean, what I've discovered is the biggest difference that we can make, and that I'm hoping that XJet success can hopefully be an example for, is that we can decide so often, as Brian said in his intro, we have the choice to be who we want to be. Sometimes circumstances knock us on the heads, there's no question, and we have to find another way through. But ultimately, as so many examples I use with the mindset, if we focus on something and understand the power of that mind and realize that everybody has that potential inside them, and we can find any way to connect, recognize that potential, draw that potential out, well, that's what I want to do. I think that's what happened with XJet. It's definitely not my company. It's it's owned by every single one of us. We don't call them employees, they're our partners, and they all have a role to play in getting us there. It is harder work. We do pay better, I believe, and we have a really, really great time winning all these awards and sharing the success. To totally wrap up, I want to invite any of you, if you want to come out. Susan's got some invites there. We have an open night out at XJet on September the 10th at 6 p.m. We also can get you a list of any of the events we do in our community. I would encourage you to come out and try and support the community in any way we can. And I want to thank, again, Brian and Kyle and the sponsors tonight for the great night. Thank you very much.
For those that would like to grab a seat, we do have some seats over here. We're going to wrap up here pretty quickly. I'm going to ask Josh a few questions, and then I'm going to open up to the group. So let me start off with, what is the most challenging issue facing your industry right now?
To stay apolitical or agnostic, we do have at the minute sort of a perception issue with private aviation, certainly in Washington DC, and that does not help. Okay, there were some mistakes made with the big three heading into Washington for a bailout, each in a private jet. That wasn't clever. But ultimately, private jets are a very efficient tool, and your commander-in-chief, it costs a couple $100,000 an hour to keep him up in the air. So we've got a big perception issue in DC that's creating a lot of stalling, and America's predominantly been the sort of home of most private jets. For the last 10 years, it's been averaging around 73-75%. Then before the recession hit, that was coming down to 60% and slipping on its way to 50%, where at one point it slipped below 50%. So the emerging companies don't have a lot of that stigma attached to it. It's a power tool, certainly in Asia, and they see the efficiency, safety, freedom associated with it. So they're growing rapidly. But after the recession, America's taken its place back at about 60% of the market. So all the major OEMs, which is the aircraft manufacturers, are here. Cessna, unfortunately, is being nipped on the heels by Brazil with Embraer. So there's some real competition happening in the marketplace today. But America, they've got the best infrastructure for private jets. They're trying to protect the tail numbers and privacy issues, and it's a constant battle with Washington not to impose fees to drive the use of private jets into the stratosphere. It's still got to be a business tool. HP or whoever it might be operating a jet can't do it just on ridiculous terms. It has to still be financially viable. So we've got to make sure we don't get that perception issue in Washington to become a bigger problem.
There's many industries that are having a constant battle with Washington in this day and age. We all went through the worst economy in 80 years, since the Great Depression. I know that me personally in commercial real estate, it was frankly a bloodbath. It was a gauntlet that we had to fight through and take our nicks and come out the other side. You talked a little bit about some of the lessons you learned, but how did that experience or the economic depression that we had, how did it affect your industry on a permanent basis, if it did? And what would that look like going forward?
To not sound like a sales pitch, but I think the XJet business model had the right type of idea. What the recession did is make aircraft owners that much more aware. They really were looking at the dollars. I mean, let's be dead frank, you can't add up flying commercial first class and private and get the numbers to work. So there's got to be some value added with going private. What the recession did is took away those margins, took away those deals where the pilots were just swiping the credit card and the owner was unaware. Everyone became much more educated. Planes are becoming much more efficient. Fuel is a big driver. We're delighted that we're the only company that we know of that are fixed to the Group 3 out of Houston. We can make no money on fuel. We don't for our membership. It's just a fixed cost. If our cost to pump that becomes greater, we eat it. So I think that's been a huge thing. But I think generally speaking, everyone's become much more educated about the current business model, and the flaws are becoming more apparent.
Last question for me. A few people have expanded their companies globally the way you are about to. What words of wisdom would you like to share with the group about doing business overseas and expanding in that kind of capacity?
That's a great question. To me, it's definitely a leap into the unknown, but I love that, leaping off the cliff and just hopefully pointing a good trajectory and hitting the water at a good angle. What I've learned, for me anyway, personally, it's all about the relationship. We've built a brand we're incredibly proud of, we're passionate about it, we're not just looking for an IRR, we're not a hedge fund looking just for a predetermined exit. We want to build a company together that we're incredibly proud of, from the investor right through to every and each partner that works for us. So I think that's been key, and luckily I think that's been our advantage. I think people have seen that it's not just a hedge fund looking for an exit to increase value. Certainly the Middle East is very wary of people coming looking for money. A lot of people are coming there and they've got a word for it in Arabic, that's an exchange. We're happy to give you money, but we want to we want to grow, we want to learn more, we want to be educated, we want to build parts for planes. So I think we fit part of that exchange in the fact that we can train some of their personnel up using our unique business model and the structures we have. So ultimately, I think it's about a relationship and it's a fair exchange. I think every business is going to be a fair exchange. And I think globally, that's really stood us well. Now, we haven't operated yet. We've handled one plane in Dubai and we're about to handle one in London. So ask me in 6 months when there's no hair. But that's what I feel for now.
Free markets allow for free exchange, which is a good thing. So with that, let's open it up to the group for questions. Anyone?
Yeah.
Yes.
What do you think about the public exchange? You got turboprop, you got the jets, public charter. How does that affect your business? Because they're up and coming. Denver Air. I know you're jet, but I think that's a good example of how you can change your business.
Yeah.
So let me just repeat the question. You just asked, how will public charters affect his business, for those who might not know?
All private aviation flying is good for us. Everybody that charters a plane ultimately could become aircraft owners one day. So all type of private flying is definitely helps grow the business. We don't do charter ourselves at XJet, but we do work with charter companies, and we have a bunch of charter aircraft in our facilities for that reason. And aircraft owners don't often like to admit this, but even if you buy the most beautiful, shiny, expensive jet, it doesn't do absolutely everything you need. It does about 85 to 90% of what you need. So even owners need charter capabilities. Sometimes they want to send their CFO down to Texas and don't want to send the big jet, or vice versa. So charter is a great thing. There's a great growth market. It gets more people into chartering private aircraft, and unfortunately, it's one of the most addictive things in the world. Once you go private, you definitely don't want to go back to TSA and the big girl in American with the hair. So I think it's a great thing. We encourage it.
Next question? Yes.
Good to have you with us tonight. I'm wearing my RCA Rondell.
Okay. Thank you.
I was at an event working with Wings Over the Rockies earlier this year with a pilot by the name of Harrison Ford. He does some acting as well. But he was lamenting the fact that people from all over the world are coming to train to be pilots in the United States. But then they're leaving and going back to their home countries. And we're training far more overseas pilots than we are here. What is the future of pilot training in American aviation?
So just to repeat the question, his concern is that it's understood that there's more pilots being trained from overseas and going back to their home countries versus necessarily staying in the United States. Josh?
Well, I'm a prime example of that. I mean, obviously, I don't have the accent, and I've got a British license, but all my main licenses are from the FAA. And that's to say, if you go around flying around the world, the majority of pilots around the world are FAA trained under American rules and regulations. Why? Cost effective, best training, great environments in Arizona and Florida. The problem with pilot training at the minute is that it's such a cyclical industry, and yet the catch-up phase is so long. What I mean by that is, once you get your license, it can take 10, 15 years to build enough hours to sit inside a United 737 or 777. So we're seeing this explosive growth, but after a period of cutbacks, people didn't want to go and be pilots. The barrier to training is expensive. To start from scratch into a commercial pilot in the right seat, I forget the numbers, but it's over 150 grand by the time you put it all together. So, we've got some barriers to entry, but America is the training capital of the world. I think it'll remain the training capital of the world. So many countries have tried to mimic what you do here in America, but it doesn't quite work. But they are losing blood and pilots to other airlines. They're paying a lot of money, better benefits. And talking about Harrison, we went for a few drinks with him, and it was funny. I mean, he's not interested in the Hollywood thing or being famous or anything. And after he's done with all the showboating, we kind of huddled in a corner. All his planes are painted green. His son's called Liam. He loves Ireland. And he basically says, the only reason I act is to support my flying habit, which I thought was a great story.
Let's finish up with one last question. Francois?
I am so intrigued with your story about how you started your company. And could you elaborate a little bit more about how you were able to gain those customers? Was it, obviously they knew you had experience, but your vision was there and your passion. So I just wanted a little bit more elaboration on that.
Francois's question was, how did you build your customer base after taking your vision into reality?
I think it was a lot of passion and a commitment to the vision, to be totally honest. I mean, I remember a lot of those meetings. I didn't have the credibility of a facility. I didn't have the credibility of an MBA. It was just really paper drawings. It was ideas, but that didn't matter. In a couple of the meetings, people reached over and closed the laptop. They didn't want to see. They wanted to hear from me about the vision. And the thing that shocked me was a great learning experience. Many of Denver's jet owners were so kind and gracious. They gave me great advice. And they really wanted to understand the business model. They want to understand, was I going to make it work? Was I going to make money? And in turn, would they be supported the way I was saying? So I wasn't prepared for that aspect of it. And certainly from folks that I was from Belfast, seeing somebody that owns a private jet just seemed so outrageously, the gap was so huge. And for them to take me under their wing a little bit and give me advice was really pretty amazing. But I think that was it. It was just, I was sold on this vision after that seminar. It wasn't a dream, it was literally an invincible vision. It's hard to describe, but it almost propels you out of bed. The days you have doubt, it pulls you along. I mean, your certainty itself, it's just, you don't get swayed. You know, and sometimes you want something to happen, and you need it to happen, it doesn't happen, it knocks you out of your game. With this sort of certainty and using that whole mind, it wasn't like that. It was just like I was expressing this vision everywhere I went. I was really certain about it, and that resonated in some way that I didn't really expect, and people joined just on that vision.
Well, I want to thank Josh again for speaking with us this evening.
Thank you.
You know, in the world we live in today, there's a lot of naysayers. There's a lot of negativity. There's a lot of division. And what I really love about Josh's talk tonight, it was one about being positive, about going after your dream. And I think we need a whole lot more of that in society today. For each speaker, I like to take some of their golden nuggets that really resonated with me and to share them again. So I'm repeating your words. Josh shared with us that every flight, every exam was a potential drop. Think about living in a world like that. Every day is a potential drop. The good news is you live in a society that even if you drop from the world's perspective, you can get back up on your feet and make something happen. Develop the power of your mind. Remove the shackles. Develop the power of your mind. Remove the shackles. What shackles do you have in your own mind right now that are holding you back from going after your vision? Think about that. Break them free. Combine your passions to make your profession. I love that one. I use that in my own world. I'm always interested in connecting my passions with my profession. And when you do that, like Mr. Shane has done, you never work another day in your life. Turn a dream into an invincible vision. Wow. Turn a dream into an invincible vision. You see, if you have an invincible vision, it'll be contagious and you can accomplish some wonderful things. So I want to encourage all of you to do that. Next month, we have Bruce Benson. For those that don't know Mr. Benson, he was in the titanium industry and now is the president of CU. Go Buffs. Thank you, Mr. Brackney, for that. And again, I really appreciate all of you coming here and making a positive difference. So thank you very much.